Everyone knows what happened with Fallout 76. Good lord, there's been so many videos made about it that even I have started to get annoyed, and I've been contributing to the problem. But I still feel as though there is one last thing that I should discuss on the topic. Before I get to that though, I'm going to make one thing very clear. What I'm about to propose does not excuse any of the crap that Bethesda has pulled with regards to anti-consumer practices, such as the whole canvas bag thing that other YouTubers have discussed ad nauseum. What I'm going to throw out there is a possible explanation for why all of this has happened. Clearly, things snowballed out of control, but I think there is an easy way to explain why Bethesda Game Studios, a group previously lauded for their games and design, pushed out such a broken product. The way I see it, this was all born from one of three things happening. Either Todd Howard and Bethesda thought that this is what their fans wanted and made this game only to be sorely surprised when gamers staged an almost literal revolt. I think it's safe to say that most people don't find this first option very likely. The second possibility is that Todd Howard and Bethesda knew this isn't what fans wanted, but also knew that it was going to potentially produce ridiculous amounts of money. Or a third option, which is a mix of these two, but I think explains all of this in a much more tactical and interesting way. Allow me to explain. First, we need to look at Bethesda more broadly, and before their most recent release. So let's set the clocks back to 2015 and go from there. We know a few things that I need to lay out real quick. We know that in 2015, Bethesda Game Studios is sitting at around 160 employees, but by 2018, in just 3 years, that number will triple. We also know that Fallout 76 was the multiplayer design from Fallout 4. Todd actually said this in a recent no-clip documentary. And this means that the actual design of the game was effectively done, they just had to build the map and balance it. We also know that by 2015, Bethesda has begun work on Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. Regardless of how infantile their designs are, they are working on them. Based on all of the interviews that Todd gave around this time, we know that Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 are considered internally to be so unbelievably ambitious that they are going to require unprecedented staff and financial resources in order to complete. Now, Bethesda Game Studios is owned by Bethesda Softworks, which is owned and operated by ZeniMax Media. This corporate structure is what ultimately screwed over Bethesda Game Studios, and I'll explain how. At Bethesda Game Studios, to hire more people into the coding staff, for instance, Todd can't just say that he needs 10 more people and then hire them. He may be the boss of Bethesda Game Studios, but he's not the boss of the whole corporation. Instead, he has to go through his boss and then his boss's boss in order to get approval to even begin the process. Todd would have to give them extensive data and reasoning as to why he needed more staff, and he would have to justify it. We know this not just because that's how corporations work, but also because he's lightly discussed this process when asked about Bethesda Game Studios' recent growth and acquisitions. Now, this makes sense and is completely routine for large corporations. Where this can become an issue is when the corporation does not give enough resources when they're needed. An example would be at my old retail job, where we needed point-of-sale systems capable of handling complicated home theater design orders. The large corporation that owned us, who shall remain nameless, refused to upgrade the hardware because it would be too expensive for what they foresaw as quote-unquote negligible revenue improvements. And so they refused to give us what we needed because it wasn't going to help the executives. Regardless of how much it would have helped those of us in the store, it didn't matter. This is why in business there is a term referred to as the couching method, and despite its name, it actually has nothing to do with Harvey Weinstein. This refers to when you need to ask management for something but have to couch it in a way where it sounds as though it will help the manager primarily instead of the underlings. When this is done, management will love the idea and sign off on it, compared to when you pitch the same idea without the couching method and they just shut it down because it won't benefit the company, or so they say. Now, I am going somewhere with all of this, I assure you. You see, ZeniMax, even from the outside looking in, seems to be a company that is just like this. Look at the most obvious example, Bethesda's creation engine. This engine is basically the Alice Cooper of game engines. It was awesome at one time, but now it just makes you sad when you look at it. I would bet an unholy amount of money that BGS has approached ZeniMax execs, asking them for the funds to redo the creation engine, but have been turned down after being told, "You're still selling games, why fix what isn't broken?" Which, to be fair, makes sense. Fallout 4 still sold very well despite being a technical mess at launch. Tens of millions of dollars would be needed to replace the creation engine. That is a huge amount of money, especially in the games industry. That could be the entire development budget for a new game. And so the hesitation for approving huge expenses is perfectly fine, but this is where people lower in the corporate structure have to be smart and a little cunning. Think about it like this. Todd Howard knows he needs to hire a metric butt-ton of people in order to fulfill his visions for Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. He knows that if he goes to his bosses and asks them for a 20% increase in the budget, they will say no. And so he asks them if they could acquire a couple of studios so that he could have his team. And knowing how much this would cost for the initial acquisition, the hardware and networking infrastructure, and the signing of all of the new employees, the execs likely say no. And so Todd realizes he needs to use the couching method to get the team that he needs. He brings the multiplayer design that they've already done for Fallout 4 to the executives and says, "Hey, my dudes, I got this game we could make that would be totes online. I know how much you love online stuff because of all that money. How about we make this game and make you tons of money?" And they respond, "Gosh darn heck yeah, let's do it." But then Todd pulls out his actual request saying, "Well, we can, but I need a lot more people on my staff in order to make this happen. Like, we'll need to acquire 2 studios and triple in size if you want to do this." Management would be jumping up and down with excitement at the thought of an MMO Fallout. And so they would, of course, and as they did, sign off on the plan immediately. And so Todd gets the team he needs for the games he's actually interested in making, and management signs off on it because they think that they're going to be making record profits. Todd likely thought that Fallout 76 was just going to release and was going to be met with average fanfare and would soon be forgotten, at which point he could move on to the games he's actually passionate about. Management thought that even if the audience were small, it would still print money for them for years and years to come. Neither party expected the game to bomb the way that it has, and neither party expected fans to turn on them so quickly. Bethesda has had pretty sycophantic fans for a long time, and they still do to an extent, many of them down in the comment section of this very video, I'm sure. But there are far fewer than there used to be. People are actually calling them out for their crap. That, to me, seems much more interesting and makes more sense when looking at the parties involved compared to the overly simplistic explanation of greed that most commentators have been assigning.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Either way, whether Fallout 76 was just a management move to get a larger staff for future projects, or if it was simply an out-of-touch move by an idiotic company, Bethesda's corporate team bungled the launch from the beginning and failed to deliver a semi-decent product. They likely thought that they could release it in its state, and that us gamers would find it endearing in the same way that we used to. They did not expect gamers to call their bluff. No matter what brought on Fallout 76, we know that it has done an immense amount of damage to Bethesda Game Studios and that they will be reeling from this for a while. Maybe, just maybe, those execs will finally see the need for a new creation engine. Who knows? Often, with a crisis comes rebirth and revival. Hopefully, this is the start of a new Bethesda that has a much larger and more robust staff and that understands that their customers won't take crap anymore and won't just buy things because they have a certain logo slapped on. Or maybe they are actually just greedy, money-grubbing troglodytes. I suppose that's a possibility too. Thank you so much for watching, it really does mean a lot. I've got a lot of stuff coming in the next couple months, much of it still to be announced, but in the immediate future, we have the Assassin's Creed Odyssey critique, which will go live hopefully sometime in the next week. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.